Friendship supreme. Friendship supreme. Finding the geek within.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael,
This is Cleve.
and welcome back to another exciting episode of Friendship.
Supreme.
We're the podcast that dares to ask, did anybody ever think to just ask the Joker if he was okay or he needed a hug?
No,
No, they never did.
because typically you don't survive seeing him.
That's fair. You guys might notice we don't have Stephanie with us today. That's because she hates us.
Yep. She apparently somewhere in some sort of law, people get vacation days.
That's just horrible.
That's
Not
a
us.
This economy. It's hard to get good help, man.
Yeah. But anyways, we're here to talk to you guys about Batman the White Knight.
It's just White Knight.
It's not Batman the White Knight?
Batman White Knight.
Oh, I'm saying the
Yeah.
Batman White Knight. Swear to me.
He does that.
So anyways, this is the premise of this is that this is in a different world, I'm assuming. It has to
Yes. They refer to it as the Murphy verse
be. Okay.
because Sean Murphy is the artist and the writer of this one.
That's always exciting when you do both. When you're doing
'Cause
both, you're doing all the work.
You're a dual threat, man.
That's
I can't
Well, I
write
guess you're
or
not.
draw.
You're probably not lettering. There is a letterer as well.
Mm. But you put what I say in there.
Did he ink it and
Uh,
color it?
the colorist is Matthew Hollingsworth. Hollingsworth.
Hollingsworth.
Yes. But it says artist and written by for him. So
Interesting. So this comic starts out with Batman chasing the Joker, like usual,
status quo.
as one does. And he happens to... You could tell that Batman's on edge. And him, Nightwing, and Batgirl show up, and Batman proceeds to beat the shit out of the Joker.
As he does, really.
He does,
if you think
right.
about it. That's
But-
pretty common.
Here's the thing. So, even that watches the films... Well, no, that's not even fair. The weird public reception of Batman is that he's like this nice guy. Like,
Mhm.
he's a good hero who doesn't kill people. He's a little gritty, but, like, kind of Michael Keaton Batman.
Right.
But realistically, Batman is a dick.
Well, as realistic as you can be about a comic book.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Well, and although and in fairness, for those critics at home that are listening right now, Michael Keaton did kill people in his Batman, so I do understand that and recognize that. He just did it nicely.
He definitely enjoys inflicting pain as like his justice.
Yeah, actually one of my favorite things about this entire comic is that. So at the very, very, very end, he's making a confession to Batgirl and Nightwing, and says essentially like, I don't use weapons and I try to make myself look like a good guy, but really I just enjoy beating them up.
That was to Gordon.
Oh, was it the Gordon? Oh,
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, that's before the
Like
big
the last page, yeah.
Yeah. But I just really liked that line where he basically was like, yeah, no, I really enjoy beating the shit out of people.
Yeah.
So he's beating the shit out of the Joker, but like this time, he apparently is in a medical facility.
Oh yeah, manufacturing pills and
Batman angrily takes a fistful of pills and punches him in the throat. Because, like one does. One's like, oh, pharmaceuticals? Bam!
Right.
Most effective way to deliver, by the way.
you could have killed him that way. Because nobody, let's also put some context. Nobody knew what the pills were or what they did.
No.
He
This is just
just
some random.
he just
warehouse.
took a handful and dropped them into his mouth to the point where the Joker was like, "Hey, I can't breathe."
Yeah,
So that was a fun start.
and turns out, guys, really all the Joker was missing was a couple
2 pills a day,
pills, and he was solid. Because
2 pills twice a day, something like that.
yeah, now we get Jack Napier, which is apparently who the Joker was all along. Which is interesting because Cleve and I have both talked about the reason that the Joker is so menacing is because he doesn't have a background, doesn't have we don't know a lot about him in the main universe.
So interesting, because as I was trying to research, get information for this, the Batman Who Laughs is created because Batman finally kills the Joker, and when the Joker dies, there's like a toxin that comes out of him that turns Batman into the Joker. So apparently, the Joker's just always got that going on. So if someone just randomly does kill him, he just then turns that next person into the Joker.
Interesting.
So who knows?
If this
Really?
is the same Joker. Well, and that brings up a good point. We get Jack Napier. He is sane. And the first thing he does is goes home to, well, first of all, he basically convinces him to let him out.
Yeah, he's got to go to trial first himself, which really makes you a sound body and mind.
And once he gets out, because he's convinced them all he's fine now, which is interesting that he was able to do so. I'm not sure I understood exactly how, but he did it.
Well, I think there was medical proof behind it that he was
Fair.
super balanced.
Then he had issues, yeah. But then he goes home to Harley, and this is why I was saying this makes a good point about potentially different Jokers. He gets to Harley and is like, hey, I'm not me anymore. I'm actually Jack. He's basically saying, I don't want to murder people and stuff.
Which is the name, I don't know if you remember, that's the name that they used in Batman
Jack
1989. Yeah.
I didn't remember the last name Napier, but I knew they called him Jack.
That's the same name, yeah.
Okay. Cool. I like that. I like the tie-in. Best Joker that exists. So
yeah, fight us.
Don't at us, bro. So tells Harley Quinn, I don't want to do this anymore, and she then beats him.
Yeah, she punched him in the stomach real good.
And then, if I'm remembering correctly, the other Harley Quinn shows up. Harleen.
Yeah, I was really confused.
I didn't like it. But I'm willing to accept it if it's a different universe, but I really did not care for it.
Well, the story of how the new Harley came into the picture made sense to me. Like, I could buy it. You know what I mean?
But I feel like it discredits, because they specifically made her look like the one from Suicide Squad, like Margot Robbie's, and sort of like the New 52 Harley Quinn. And the Harley Quinn from New 52 is a favorite of mine, specifically because I already hate the idolization of Joker-Harley Quinn relationship because of the abusive nature of it. And Harley Quinn in the New 52 has broken free of that and has been like, that was toxic and I shouldn't have been in that. And even in, I would tell you, Birds of Prey, the movie, they went along the same lines with this Harley Quinn. So for them to have someone that is very much in the same image of those two, that is still in the mental state that she's currently in, is just kind of felt like walking back on it.
So you didn't like that it attacked your Harley Quinn personally? The Harley Quinn that you liked?
I don't like that we have a strong Harley Quinn in the DC universe, in that she has left the Joker.
But we had a strong Harley Quinn in this one.
Right. So I'm more on board with that one than I am with this other one.
Well, yeah. And we don't know how long. I don't remember how long they said that they've been working together.
Yeah.
But she also seems kind of crazy.
Real crazy.
Because she was like, I like this. I like the pain. Like, bring it on. Yeah. So that was just really unstable. in the long run, and that begins to show even further. I think it was interesting because it's almost like they're Sean Murphy's reason of why the costume change even existed. Because
I
even
guess that's kind of fair. That's kind of
old-
a cool idea.
old Harley was like, that costume really sets women back the way that you're dressed. And I thought that was also kind of funny.
Yeah. Also, this Harley Quinn happens to just be a mastermind, apparently. But anyways,
Well, I struggled with that because at one point she was like, I am, but I'm just doing this to get him back, and then I'm going back to sidekick. I really don't. This isn't my thing. I'm not looking forward to doing this in the future. I just want to do
the
this.
other one.
Oh, yeah. No, she was smart enough to leave.
Yeah.
So that's a good head start.
Well, yeah, I liked her a lot. I guess, you know what, fair point, that she's crazy, and it was actually kind of an interesting transition. I think when I first read it, it felt weird, and then as it went on, I was fine with it, but it just, the initial, like, oh, but there's actually 2 Harley Quinns, I was like, okay, whatever.
And they did that early.
Quick.
So and they didn't reveal till later, which was the Joker was robbing a bank and just asked her for help, and just started calling her Harley, and she just went with it.
Yeah.
They didn't reveal that till what?
Later,
There's 8
halfway through.
issues,
Yeah.
so
About
6 or
3
7.
4. I would have thought it was a little bit later, but maybe
I can't remember, but it felt like I've been reading for a while before I got that in. But you know what? You're right, because I think that's when her and the Mad Hatter first started getting on the same page.
Yep. So Jack Napier, even though he is better than being the Joker, he still is a little bit of a mastermind.
A little
He's still
mischievous.
A little mischievous. Happens to use clay, somehow pieces these two together. It's just impressive. Never would have thought of this. Essentially, you remember when, did you ever watch South Park?
Yes.
Remember when Eric Cartman made
Yes.
chocolate milk out of ashes? Essentially did that with Clayface. And somehow put Clayface inside everybody. And then mind controlled Clayface with...
What did you see how he put Clayface on everybody?
I feel like it did.
Well, you were saying somehow, so I didn't know if you noticed it.
Maybe I didn't.
He invited all the villains for drinks and put it in the drinks.
Oh, so he definitely made them chocolate milk. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I thought you were bringing it up. Yeah, no, he mind controlled Clayface and then took dust of Clayface and put it in their drinks. That way, by controlling Clayface, he would control all the rest of them, which is gross.
Super gross, but amazingly smart.
Yes.
I don't know the logic behind
Agreed.
whether that would actually work. I'm not like,
It did.
how are you getting it in their brain? But whatever, I don't care. You did it. You made it happen. It's there. So he's controlling every single villain in all of Gotham.
I would assume Clayface is kind of like Sandman. So every little speck of him he controls.
it goes
So
wherever.
that being in their body would, I mean, eventually they'd poop it out, right?
or
Or whatever.
So
Don't look at it too close.
it's gonna really all of this could just be defeated by poop.
You gotta go, man.
Controls all the villains in Gotham, uses them to basically set up Batman and make Batman look like a horrible person, which in fairness he kind of is.
Isn't terribly outside of the truth.
Really, this whole comic is a giant spotlight on the fact that the Joker and the Batman aren't much different.
Well, and you know what's funny is you didn't like at first till we kind of talked it out about the whole Harley Quinn thing. It was tough to me to be like, Batman is wrong. Because I've read comic after comic after comic where Batman's been nothing but right.
That's fair.
So to finally like,
It is weird to read something challenging to we're talking thousands of comics that have come out. Thousands and thousands of comics that have come out with Batman in them and him being a good guy.
well, and not only that, but even, okay, there's a whole comic line dedicated to how Batman beat everyone in the Justice League. And then that plan falls into the wrong hands and everybody's mad at Batman. He's like, I'd do it again because there needs to be checks and balances for you people. And they're like, well, what's your check and balance? He's like, it's you guys. If I get out of control, you guys will be there. I need to plan for if you guys get out of control. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
And you put that along with, you find out later on that Alfred's sick and dying, and that's really the only person that has always been there for you. So struggling with losing that guy and having the Joker push your buttons, yeah, you throw a bunch of pills at Guy's throat. Things happen.
Yeah, you'd eventually snap. Um, yeah, I mean, and at this point, so this is also why it was interesting where this falls in this line, because Jason Todd is a big part of this. And I say big
Yes.
part, but like the mystery of Jason Todd is a big part of this.
Mm-hmm.
So Jason Todd was a Robin that existed, and the Joker caught him and was interrogating him and beat the crap out of him with a lead pipe. And as far as viewer or readers knew, he died.
Mm-hmm.
They actually voted for his death. People, DC said, hey, what do you guys think should happen to Jason Todd next? And it was, does he live or does he die? And people hated him so much as Robin, they actually killed him. But he comes back as Red Hood. So everybody that reads comics or has a familiarity with Batman's storyline, at least, understands that Red Hood exists or understands the Jason Todd somewhat.
Right.
So it was weird that, like, in this comic, the entire time he keeps talking about Jason Todd and what happened to him and how it's really messed with his mind. That he kind of, like, he feels responsible that Jason Todd's dead and doesn't know anything about him.
And I wanted to talk about that too, because I noticed this has to be a different universe, because in this one, Dick Grayson's in it and he's Nightwing, and he's saying this was there. It was, I read it 5 or 6 times. I read the whole page because I'm confused, because he said this was the Robin before me.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, I read that wrong.
Number 1, right?
Yes,
he was number 1.
So I went back to the top of that page and I read it again. And I was like, no. I went back to the top of the page and read it again. I'm like, what am I missing?
No, I thought it was weird. Yeah, the order of them is Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, and I cannot remember the next kid's name. The one that becomes just before Damian. I don't remember the girl's name either. Kelly something.
Tim Drake.
Tim Drake, thank you.
Kelly.
It's Kelly something.
Carrie Kelly.
Carrie Kelly. Okay, cool. Carrie Kelly, and then Damian is Robin. Mm-hmm. I believe those are the only 5 that I can think of off the top of my head.
There's random, but yeah, the main ones.
But yeah, no, I thought that was weird too. So essentially, we're to think that Jason Todd is the first Robin.
Yes.
But nothing different about Batgirl. She's still Barb.
Yeah, and she's still close in age with Dick Grayson. I enjoyed, real quick, because we won't talk about her tons because she didn't have a lot to do with it, but I enjoyed Batgirl in this one. She's real high spirited, and at the same time really like kept things grounded.
I'm liking the newer iterations of Batgirl. So sure. just a side note, Cleve knows this, and I've talked about it a couple times, buying comics from your local comic book store. You guys absolutely should if you haven't yet. COVID-19 is screwing them over. So please, for the love of God, go buy comics from your local place. But anyways, my local shop happens to have auctions and sales and stuff during the day. And I randomly picked up a couple issues for Batgirl because I try to collect comics that I think my daughter will have positive images from. And Batgirl happened to be one that I was like, oh, I'll buy that. It was cheap-ish. So picked it up, and I really liked it so far for myself. So, but Batgirl,
support women.
I liked
local comic book stores,
right,
all the time.
I liked Nightwing too. I actually liked both of in this comic. I liked both of them a lot. I thought they had very reasonable and understandable characteristics based on the way that Bruce was treating them both.
But I feel like Dick didn't have as big a spotlight as Barbara did, and Barbara's wasn't huge. But
I think maybe because we'll fast forward a little bit. Jack eventually basically wants to run for some kind of political position. Not really anything specifically mentioned, because he goes and talks to Duke, who is the guy from what was the name? Back front. That feels right.
I'll find it. Keep talking.
I think it is Backford. So he finds Duke, who's essentially like not really. I don't know. He's not really. He's a community leader, so he's popular in the community, well known. Similar like Luke Cage. Luke Cage isn't exactly, the governor, but everybody in Harlem knows him, loves him, respects him. Kind of that mentality. They all know
Right.
Duke, they respect Duke. So Jack goes, Duke, I need your backing. We're gonna take Gotham down. We're gonna make him. We're gonna take all the corruption out, and then comes up with the idea for the GTO, which is the Gotham Terrorist
I can find that too.
Organization. No, terrorist
Slow down, man.
opposition. Sorry. White Knight. Garish. Okay, so he wants to form the GTO, which is the Gotham Terrorist Oppression Unit.
Yes.
And essentially, the idea of this is actually kind of cool. It kind of makes sense, actually. I kind of was on board with something like this. A Batman or a superhero plus councilman. Okay, so Jack Napier wants to run for council. That makes sense. That's not a
Backport was the name.
Backport. Okay, cool. I did find it funny. So I'm getting bounced around, and I apologize. Please feel free to stop me. I know I talk a lot, Troy. Troy had mentioned this because he said there was one of my friends suggested this comic because he said there's some correlations with
Friend.
Right. He likes Superman. Gross. But suggested that there's some similarities into current situations going on right now and this comic book, and more relating to the fact that the police are corrupt. They need checks and balances, and there needs to be some kind of same thing with the vigilantism. But anyways, I did think it was interesting that the reporter at one point in time, there's two reporters that you every once in a while see, and there's a male and a female, both white reporters.
I thought the female was black. She looked black to me.
Maybe. I was reading it on my phone, so it's possible that it's kind of small.
Give the black characters their credit, man. Maybe.
No, for sure.
I don't know. She looked.
Okay, so she is a person of color, and I couldn't tell you what, but she is. But I did find it interesting did you notice the one time that the white reporter said Blackport instead of Backport?
He didn't say that.
I thought it was him.
It was some guy at a bougie party that Bruce Wayne was at.
Mm.
The one that remember when he was like, "Oh, you make money off of Batman's damage," and he was like, "Yeah, if there's anything you can bet on in Gotham, it's crime." He was like, "I take the place the damages, I buy it, I flip it, and then I sell it for more than it's worth."
Yeah,
yeah.
Right.
But he definitely says Blackport, and then he gets punched in the face, and that felt good.
He punched in the face. But no, there are correlations because there's a lot of misrepresentation, and minority groups are kind of being essentially like poor, and minority groups are being pushed to the side, and they're saying that Batman basically takes the crime to these other towns and fights them there so they don't damage the nice parts of Gotham.
Because the 1% lives.
Right. So like the 1% is really benefiting from this current state of Batman-ness. Yeah, the Blackport thing that just came up in my head. Anyway, so GTO. He wants to create the GTO, which is a more balanced, having the vigilantes and the Gotham PD work together. And one of the comments that Jack makes that I thought was a really good point was, if Batman really cared about this city and cared about the police department, why was he not ever sharing his technology with you guys?
Right. And I thought that was interesting because, yeah, why not?
Right.
And it's one of those questions that, like, a fan just asks, you know? It's something that some guy who's just at home who reads Batman was like, oh, if you get, you know, it's like his argument for why Batman's the bad guy instead of a good guy. Just comic book shop talk, really.
Yeah, just I imagine that the writer of this was just talking with some buddies and said, you know, why not? Why didn't he do this? And so it brings up a point of like, Jack initially talks to Batman about it, who immediately shuts it down, like without even listening. So then he goes to Nightwing and Batgirl and says, hey, I wanted Batman, but I guess I'll settle for you two. What do you guys think? And they basically come to an agreement that they will participate in this as long as Batman is they'll help detain Batman as long as he's never unmasked.
Yes, and they also make a deal where they are on the team, but identities are still kept secret.
Right. A lot like, if any of you guys have ever watched Arrow, a lot like the deal that they had for a little while. It didn't work out for them.
The jig was up for a whole Oliver Queen from the get-go.
Oh, that's fair, yes. So GTO is created. They don't give them Batmobiles, but they do help them with technology and give them some information.
Yeah, they like to call them Batmobiles, but they're definitely just
they're
souped up cars.
Yeah.
Fast and Furious style.
And they come up with this grand scheme to bring Batman down, because Batman now has also beaten the crap out of Jack when he's not the Joker, because Batman is convinced that he's done something wrong. He's right, but he doesn't know he's right.
Well, and what's funny is it really pushes them over the edge when I wish I could have seen it finish, because the task force was working together to chase Neo Joker, who is the second Harley Quinn, to try to, in hopes to bring the Joker back. And they're working well together. They're all communicating. They're all on their way. And then Batman comes in and just fucks everything up.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, that's a good...
And just demolish the bridge. And it just what he's been doing, which is coming in, fucking shit up.
Real Team America style.
Team America, yeah.
America, fuck yeah. Just kicking shit over, blowing things up. Like, all right, we did it.
Don't worry, guys. We got the terrorists.
Yeah.
The Eiffel Towers on the side, and yeah, I mean, and it's true. He comes in there. I mean, you find out later that he's kind of been fixing it all, but it's still
fair. But you know, you see people in hospitals and stuff because he's driving on roofs, and
yeah, the little girl.
They address that. They're like, "What happened? You know, you drove on that roof. Like, surely people are hurt." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, this girl's in the hospital now."
Or the construction worker that he either hit or almost hit. I don't remember. It was
the security guard he did hit. The security guard, he said, "Where did he go?" And went,
shucked him.
Bam! Just knocked him down.
Well, the security guard was trying to tell him where he went. Hey, you're looking for the Joker. He went to, and he just got pushed over.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, Batman was an ass. And so then...
His basically dad was dying, okay?
I know. No,
I try to give him a little slack on it.
I get it.
But he also admits himself that they've kind of been off the rails for quite some time. And he's just kind of been doing whatever he wants, and he mentally wasn't where he needed to be for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, again, maybe Batman needs hugs. We go back to the fact that Batman and the Joker are basically the same person, just on different sides of the coin.
You know, I watched a documentary. I wish I could remember the name, but it was basically... Batman and Bill? No, I wish. I'll watch that one again. Basically that Batman and his villains could be versions of Batman. Like, if things went differently, he could have ended up being the Joker or the Riddler or Two-Face or Mr. Freeze or Scarecrow, or, you know, if he couldn't overcome his fear, maybe he'd ended up being the Scarecrow. If he was not as crazy and just took a villainous route, he could easily be the Riddler. If he ended up losing his mind, he could have easily been the Joker. So that's what makes his fight against them so interesting, is because they could easily
He's
all be
essentially fighting
him.
himself. Yeah.
Right. Different parts of himself that he's having
Right.
to keep down.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of times throughout this entire comic where they very much emphasize the fact that the Joker and Batman are basically the same person.
Stubborn mules.
What?
Stubborn mules.
Yeah. So yes, Cleve is right. Batman basically comes in, screws everything up that the GTO is trying to do. So then the GTO says, "We're going to get him," and they did. They use this is interesting. They're like, "We need something that's analog and doesn't run on all these computers." And Dick Grayson's like, "Yeah, I got you. Don't worry, I'll steal it." It goes to steal the old 1989 Batmobile.
I like at a certain point they're like, "Hey, we brought you more we brought you upgrades," and it was like all the old Batmobiles, because you see the one from the '60s show, and
who was driving that? The Harley Quinn, Harleen Quinzel was driving it. Loved that. Yes, so then Neo Joker becomes like the real villain in this, which is, like Cleve said, the second Harley Quinn iteration, because she's trying to get the Joker to come out, basically saying that if she takes over the town, the old Joker is going to be so pissed that she one-upped him, he's going to come back out.
Which isn't a terrible plan.
Fair. So they all team up together, and somehow Harleen Quinzel, this is how I'll differentiate the two, convinces Jack, "Hey, you should ask Batman for help, because that's the only way you're going to be able to beat her." Because they put Batman in jail, by the way.
Right. They captured Batman and put him in jail. And, of course, Jack doesn't want to do it because his whole campaign has been run on, "We don't need him."
Yeah. So it looks real bad when he says, "I need him." Batman agrees as long as Joker's willing to give a full confession to everything that he's done, to prove that Batman was not crazy when he said, "Hey, the Joker's doing some shit." Trying to think of anything interesting that happened during that fight.
Which one?
When they start fighting Neo Joker. When Batman agrees, he basically gives them the Batmobiles, which is what Clee's talking about, which is cool because you get to see all the Batmobiles, the different iterations that existed.
They released Clayface out of people's body.
They did. At one point, the Mad Hatter and Neo Joker were like, abandoned ship, and ran from this giant freeze ray that they created. Oh, holy shit, I forgot. How would we not go down this? The fact that Mr. Freeze's dad is a Nazi, and then Thomas and Martha helped, and they were like, and then suddenly it was like, maybe Bruce's family was Nazis, and then you find out that that's not the case. And anyways, they apparently came up with the program to bring Nazis over that were defecting and have them help, but apparently Mr. Freeze's dad was still a dick and still a Nazi, and decided, "I'm going to make weapons." Mm-hmm. And so Mr. Freeze actually left to try to work with Thomas to make healing properties of the cryogenic work that he was doing. But anyways, somehow Neo Joker gets this giant ice cannon that she's made and is just freezing people left and right. And I loved when they were driving up and they're like, "Hey, please don't destroy this thing because we need it to unfreeze people."
Yeah, it froze the whole town. Did you see the panel that had the woman and the man and they were holding the baby like on a bridge? Yeah. And it was just solid ice. Yeah, that was, I mean, sure, we need a big doomsday thing.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, that was actually, I think, derived from the Batman and Robin film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, because if you remember, he had that giant cannon that was a nice thing, and he pointed at the town and shot it all over the place.
How did you feel about Clayface being just an eye, a pair of eyes, a brain, and a tongue?
That was really weird, but I guess they took all the essence of his clay, and thus that's what was left.
Real gross, though.
It was. You carried around in a backpack.
It was in her backpack, just hanging around.
It had to be next to top Mad Hatter, otherwise the Joker's device would work instead of hers.
You know, the biggest thing that I felt like was super the same was Gordon. It was just like that. I'm not sure that's a Gordon from a different universe. I'm sure it's the same Gordon it's always been.
So
nothing different about him whatsoever.
I enjoyed the turmoil that Gordon went through, having to essentially be like, "We're going to arrest you, Batman."
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was real pissed when he announced it. Because Batman blew up a bridge.
He did. Well,
So
there's multiple times in it, and so here's where the corruption comes in, and here's where there need to be checks and balances with the police department and superheroes. And I'm not going to insert my political beliefs, but they're doing need to be in the real world too. So, haha, take that inserted.
boom.
Not necessarily superheroes; those don't exist right now. We could use some.
I need a hero.
But there definitely needs to be more checks and balances, obviously. That being said, one of the very clear points in time where they're just blatantly abusing their power is Bullock's like, "Hey, we need to help our men down there," and and Gordon's like, "Nah, our men are good. We need Batman." And then he's like,
Yeah.
"Let's take our flight. We're going to take our helicopter over to help Batman instead." And then Bullock's like, "No, like my men." He's like, "I don't care. Bye."
Yeah, we got this. That's an order.
Here's
And-
you know, a bunch of supervillains fighting a bunch of cops, and then there's Batman fighting one supervillain. And it's like, no, Batman needs the help.
And Gordon's one of the good ones.
Yeah,
What does that tell you?
yeah. But I think that's just kind of what the point was, is that here's two essentially good characters who are good and have done good, but under the circumstances and basically being jaded by constantly having to do this, have now become not so great people.
And that happens.
In the real world, that happens. That
Yeah.
happens often. And
You get complacent.
and you get slapped with a bitch slap of truth at the end of it, much like these two characters did in the end, where they are faced with the reality that they fucked up, and they need to be better and grow from that. And that was kind of cool, and that's something that everybody I think can learn from, is
Yeah.
that, you know, bad things happen, but learn from it.
Well, even too, there's a dialogue where Batman's like, "Gordon, you just need to trust me." Gordon's like, "I don't even know who you are."
Yeah.
So you're telling me to trust this random guy and a cape jumping around buildings? He's like, "Do you hear it when I say it? Do you hear how crazy that sounds?"
Jack Napier keeps kind of, towards the end, starts flipping back and forth between the Joker and Jack. How did you feel about that?
I thought it was interesting. I liked it because he wasn't cured, and you knew he wasn't cured, and you could tell that very early because he's training with Harley Quinn, and he coughs up Harleen Quinzel, and he coughs up blood, and it's like, I'll never be rid of the Joker. He's always going to be there. In fact, he's the stronger element. I like how they did it. They did it really well, where you could see his eyes kind of change color, and he starts, he kind of gets a little paler and starts to grin.
Yeah, the transition art was done really well. So good on him, because it did look good.
The harshest one was the wedding one.
Yes. So in the end, he has to basically choose. The Neo Joker, or new Harley, is like, "Jump on this rocket with me, Joker." And was like, "Harleen, if you really love him, you'll send him with me." And she looks at him and is like, "I love you. You should go." And he's like, yeah, and pushes a button and ejects her out as the motorcycle, like in the Dark Knight series, where the Batmobile turns into a motorcycle.
Yeah,
And then,
one of them had the tumbler, and
Yeah.
Barbara had the tumbler because she shot off like a rocket. It was good stuff.
Yeah, no, it was good. And so then he sacrifices himself so that she can get out, but then Batman saves him. And he's pissed that Batman saved him.
I thought that was really funny when he was like, "You should have just let me die. I would have gone out a hero." And he's like, I wouldn't have let that happen. And he's like, "Let me die or go out a hero." And he goes, "Pick one."
Yeah, that was good.
Or both, or something like that.
Yeah, he said pick one. So no, but at the end, he basically creates this confession tape and says, "Here you go. Here's everything I promised. As long as Harleen Quinzel is safe, then we're good." And so then you see him being escorted to his new cell, which we gave him a brand new cell, and it is a much cushier cell. I am curious as to what he meant by saying, and that maybe you have a better insight to it. He said, "I kind of miss my old cell. That's where I found the Joker, or I discovered the Joker."
He does.
Is it a reference to Harleen Quinzel meeting him there, and then?
So
anyway.
I found out there is a spin-off little miniseries
Okay.
called Batman: Curse of the White Knight.
Oh, and it's still
So
going.
so well, oh yeah. So maybe it dives a little deeper.
Okay, interesting. Um, yeah, so maybe we go into that because they do leave it as a cliffhanger almost.
Yeah.
So he does make one final request that they marry him and Harleen before he turns back into the Joker. They go through the ceremony. She says, "I do." He asks Jack, "Do you do?" And then he turns back into the Joker and screams, "I do," and then laughs maniacally. And then we leave him.
What else to do with him? But then
Uh,
you find out that Harleen set everything up. She
yes.
gave Joker the pills. She set up the recording of Batman losing his mind. She leaks the footage. She's got it all together because she says that the world deserves to know what Jack Napier could have done.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I said in the beginning that Harleen is really the mastermind in the end of it. She somehow pieces this all together.
Yeah. But can't stress enough, even though we're reviewing this, we don't do any justice to reading it. I thought it was a really good comic.
Absolutely. No, it was really, really good. Very action filled. Art was beautiful. I tend to be more of like I stare at the art more than I read. I obviously I read it, but anyways, art was really well done. Story was told really well. Some great points. Um, Alfred leaves a beautiful note for Bruce.
Yeah, but Alfred sacrifices himself
Yeah.
to save Bruce. I don't remember if he said that or not.
We did not.
It was suggested for us to read. I've actually owned it for quite some time, and I've not had time to sit and read it, so that worked out.
Yeah, we appreciated the suggestion. It was good. Did you see correlations with what's happening today and this book? Do you think that it has similar messages? What was your thought on that input that we got before we read it?
In the point of view, only for Duke. Like everyone else's view, I can't transition it to this world. Like, you know what I mean? But for Duke, he was this military guy who didn't get a chance to take care of the streets. The police, ironically, weren't in his neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
which was a problem. But our problem is that there are police in that neighborhood, and they're doing whatever they like to do.
True.
And he just wanted his neighborhood to be safe. And that sadly didn't necessarily mean that police would be there. He didn't feel represented, he didn't feel heard, and nobody cared. So in that aspect, and the point of view of Duke, yes.
What if we took into consideration, like if we considered Batman to just be an entity or an arm of the police force? Because, like we said, and we didn't really finish
Like
it.
these special task force that are following the protesters, I can see that. But at the same time, I feel like Batman had a mental thing behind, like a mental block behind it, and I don't necessarily know that that's what's going on in the world now with these officers.
Fair.
But there was
a large scapegoat to a large population that doesn't
right. Everyone's not struggling.
Like, yeah, it's anecdotal where it's the one person's situation. It's not everybody's situation, so you can't blanket it and say, "Oh, all these people are dealing with some shit right now."
Right, but the fact that he answered to no one is really the big take of it. Batman didn't have to answer for anything that he did. And he, at least, you find out, atoned for it by paying for whatever he messed up. But throwing money at it doesn't fix that little girl's leg or arm or whatever it was that was wrong with her.
Or the fact that he destroyed an entire bridge. So most likely, even though they didn't discuss it, people died.
Right. Yeah.
I think it is the idea that there's not much for them to answer to, that they're essentially being let run rampant and doing what they want. And really, like there are times where the news is like, oh, they shouldn't be doing this, but they keep doing it. And somehow they're allowed to keep doing it. And they're essentially given an insane fund to do it.
Yep.
Because as far as these people know, Batman's nobody. They don't know who Batman is. They don't know he's Bruce Wayne and that he's pumping all this money into it.
Right. And why are the taxpayers sitting here paying
Right.
for Bruce Wayne or for Batman to wreck an entire building that nobody in Gotham is going to put money towards?
Well, and then the other idea is that if you think about it, they said that someone at some point made the observation that Batman essentially created the supervillains. Because Batman was around stopping people, suddenly supervillains started existing.
Right. Because you had to be more than just a criminal to have an upper hand, to have a chance.
Right, and which could point to the idea that the escalation of law enforcement, as we've seen recently, is not in any means an appropriate level of escalation.
Right. Batman acknowledges that maybe the Joker wouldn't have gotten where he's gotten had he not been just doing whatever Batman wanted to do.
Right.
Batman almost created the escalation.
Which is, I mean, and again, yeah, it's what we see videos right now of protesters out there
Shot in the face with beanbags?
protesting very peacefully and then just getting the snot beaten out of them, getting shot with beanbags in the face by people who are supposed to be trained to de-escalate and instead seem to just be turning it up to 11 every time. And I think that might be also a correlation between the two, just that Batman comes in with these extremes. And it's not like, hey, slap some handcuffs on you, pepper spray you in the face, let's go to jail. It's like, I'm going to blow a fucking building up to catch you.
And what I think is interesting is that you don't know, you've not read the Batman comic in quite some time, but there were stealthy tactics he used to take.
Right.
And now you see this comic where it's just a fool running through a wall.
And that was his whole thing. He was a tactician. Like, everybody always goes back like, oh, Batman has no superpowers. He's just, if the IRS showed up, he'd have no powers at all. But it would break down to like the old school Batman, who was a tactician and a detective, and that was the reason he was good at what he did. He has very logical thinking. He's very methodical. Like, he thinks everything out. Like you said, he has a plan for every single one of the Justice League members because he knows that shit could go down one day, and he needs to know exactly what to do. And so for him to just become reckless like he is. Yeah. And it's the idea that there's a symbol that should be protective. Like, we look to Batman. Let's say we're Gotham Knights, right? And we look to Batman and say, he's our symbol of hope. We look at Metropolis, and they got fucking Superman. Like, they got some shit going for him, man. Oh, well, not New Age Superman who's snapping necks and shit, but, like, the old school Superman's like, good old boy, takes care of everybody, loves everybody. Ma and Pa Kent taught him right. And these guys got Batman who gets the job done, but it's nitty and gritty, and it's not great sometimes.
Even Snyder's Batman's branding people and shit.
Shit. But no, I think it's that idea that he's supposed to be the symbol of hope, which in a perfect reality, police officers should be. But they're not. And they abuse that, much like he abused the same thing. Like, he's like, I'm Batman. I can do whatever the hell I want. I don't care. He thought he was going to get away with just blowing up a library.
Like, I have a house that's empty next to me, and there were some teenagers in it doing what teenagers do. And I want to call the cops on it, but I'm scared to because I don't know what they'll talk to me about, and I don't know what they'll do to these kids. It's not worth one of these kids losing their life because...
Can you imagine Batman showing up and beating the shit out of them?
Right.
I mean,
I wouldn't be able to call Batman.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't joke because I know it's a real situation that's happened.
No, but you're right. Like, that's it all depends on who answers that call, man.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Am I going to get the level-headed guy that understands, hey, these kids are 15? Or am I going to get the guy who, has been waiting to take his aggression out on somebody because his boss is being an ass? And
so this happened, and I cannot remember her name right now. Damn it. I want to say it was here, though. We talked about this one before, where the neighbor saw that the door was open and was like, I'm concerned. So I called the cops, and they show up, and this woman is playing video games with her younger brother. And she sees someone rustling out in the window or outside in her yard, and goes and finds her firearm and goes to look out the window, and a police officer shoots her through the window and kills her.
Tatiana Jefferson.
Tatiana, thank you. Where was it?
Fort Worth.
Yeah, okay, Fort Worth. I knew it. I was pretty confident it was in Texas, and that's why it was obviously everything's relevant, but it was more local, so it hit harder here in this area. A lot more people talk about it. But I mean, perfect example for what exactly you're talking about. So what, you call someone and realistically they should walk in there and say, hey, 15-year-old kids, you shouldn't be drinking, get out of this house. And instead they kick the door in and shoot a kid.
Right.
And then, that's on you. Like at this point, that neighbor who called the cops, who in his mind was calling for a goodwill check, which is
just can you check this out? I'm concerned.
Which should just be a police officer showing up and saying, hey, I'm here. Is everybody okay in there? Which I imagine had they yelled and announced their name, she would have came to the door and was like, hey, everything's good, bye. But instead they decided to be weird and creep around her house. And so then she assumed that somebody bad's outside.
Yeah, because she went for her gun because she was scared.
Right. In her own home. But, I mean, so this is why I said checks and balances, and I'm not supposed to insert my own political belief. But
no, fuck that. That's our show.
If you guys have already read this comic book, let us know in the comments down below what you thought. If you haven't, go read it. We suggest it. It was actually a really good read. It's a one-off. You don't have to know anything about any other character to read this. If you guys have any suggestions for comic books that you'd like us to read and talk about, let us know.
Down in the comments below.
How else can they let us know about that, Cleve?
We have a Facebook, we have an Instagram, we have a Twitter. They're all Friendship Supreme, except Twitter. We didn't put the eyes in there because there was a limitation. So all the eyes are on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com. You just search Friendship Supreme. We have a Patreon where you can give money. That's is patreon.com/Friendship Supreme. We have an email, friendship.supreme@gmail.com. And I bet you if you email us, we'll reply within the next hour and a half.
Give me 24 hours.
2 hours.
It depends on when you're emailing me.
Fair. Between business hours.
Right. My business hours are from 12 to 1. Thank you.
Check out our podcast anywhere you can listen to podcasts. We are branching out into different forums. Right now we have Starstruck, where we review the CW's new show Stargirl. It's going really well. I think you should check it out. Also, check out last month, me and Michael had Animania, where we checked out the first episode of different animes, one per week. That went really well as well. You will enjoy it. I put my life on it.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed tonight's episode. I've been Michael.
This is Cleve, and I wish I'd never met Bruce Wayne. When Clayface was coming after the Joker, and he yelled, "Joker!" And Batman was like, "He's coming for you." And Joker's like, "Yeah, thanks, world's greatest detective."